Hello nerds and nerdettes, and welcome back to the channel where once again we have a new video for you guys. Today's video we will be continuing the series recapping the year of 2024 through comics. We kicked off this series going over my top 5 reads and releases of indies / smaller publishers, and then we went over my Marvel list. Today's video we are going to be talking about the distinguished competition, which is none other than DC Comics. DC had a huge year when it comes to collected editions. We finally got a multitude of omnibuses and deluxes that we've all been hoping and praying for a really long time, and I am super excited to talk about some of these books because I haven't yet here on the channel. But a quick reminder that this channel does have a sponsor, which is organicpricebooks.com. We do have a discount code where you can save yourself $2 on any order, but if you're ordering 4 or more books, you can use the code staynerdyshipittogether to save yourself 5% on that entire order. Great way to save yourself some money, but it is also a great way to help support the channel. So thank you to anyone that does decide to use the code when ordering from Organic Price Books. But let's go ahead and jump into this list, starting with, of course, number 5. And first up at number 5 is a book that I feel like is already kind of breaking the rules, but I make the rules around here, so we will bend them just a little bit for this book, and that is DC versus Marvel, the Omnibus. You may be scratching your head wondering why a book that has the Marvel name on it is on a DC list. Well, this book was published by DC Comics, therefore it can appear on this list when following the make-believe rules that I've created in my head. This is on the list for obvious reasons. This is an omnibus that me and probably everybody in the community thought would never happen. And here it is. Not only do we have this DC versus Marvel omnibus, but somewhat recently we got the Amalgam Age omnibus finally released as well. So we have two omnibuses that feature DC and Marvel characters and the 2 publishers playing nice in the omnibus itself, and that is a nerd's wet dream. It feels unreal. It feels fake. If you told me about this omnibus and the Amalgam Age omnibus 5 years ago, I would probably tell you you're lying. But here it is in my hands. It came out and it was a glorious read. Yes, I actually enjoy a great deal of the stories in this particular omnibus, but that's because when jumping into this omnibus, I looked at it for what it is, which is a whole slew of legendary creators, from John Romita Jr., John Romita Sr. to Roger Stern, Jerry Ordway, just to name a few massive names, Walt Simonson, all emptying out the toy box, grabbing the most popular and fan favorite characters and smashing them together and seeing what would happen. Obviously, there's a lot that they had to or boxes they had to check when telling these stories, but it is still so much fun. I'm a fan of DC and Marvel before anything. I'm a fan of these characters before anything. These characters shaped and molded me into the adult and man that you guys are watching talk about comic books on YouTube currently, and that's why I love this omnibus so much, because it features characters from both of those publishers, and I get to see them fight each other and then work together, take on Rogues Gallery members, all kinds of awesome things taking place here. Obviously, the Teen Titans X-Men team up is the crossover that I feel like everybody talks about. It's the only crossover I feel like everybody talks about, but there's so much just history in here from the Superman Spider-Man crossovers. There's 2 of them which are just so historical. You have the Batman and Hulk crossover where Batman literally kicks Hulk in the gut and defeats him. We have the Batman Daredevil crossovers, which are great. They play beautifully off one another, especially when it comes to the Rogues Gallery. The Batman and Punisher crossovers. You have the Fantastic Four and Superman. I'm just scratching the surface here. There's so much fun to be had in here. No, don't open it up reading it and say, oh, this should be some critically acclaimed comic books. It is not that at all, but it is so much fun. And comics exist to obviously be thought-provoking and tell us a story, but they also exist to be fun. And that's exactly why I love this omnibus so much. And it's just one I never thought I would have in my possession, or that would ever be a thing. And here it is. But that's exactly why it's at number 5. So let's jump to number 4. And at number 4, we do have a deluxe edition, and it's also a DC Black Label deluxe edition, or DC Vertigo, whatever they're calling it nowadays. And that is We Three by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. This, for years now, has been one of my favorite Black Label titles for a multitude of reasons. One, it features animals. I am a huge animal lover. I've always kind of connected more with animals than humans. I like dogs more than humans in most cases. And this features the main characters, which are a bunny, a dog, and a cat that were all weaponized by the government and decide to go home and escape. Obviously, I'm being very, very vague there. I do not want to give away anything when it comes to this story because it is so great. Grant Morrison does an incredible job telling this story and also making it incredibly heartfelt and emotional. This is a story that will get your eyes a little bit glossy and wet. Maybe you'll even shed a tear. I'm not the most emotional guy, but this one caught me definitely. And that obviously is a high acclaim right there, because any book that causes a emotional response is a very, very good book. On top of that, we do have Frank Quitely, which I know his art is hit or miss in the community. I'm not exactly sure why. I'm a huge fan of Frank Quitely. He's probably in my top 5 artists. His set pieces, his paneling, his splash pages are literally perfect. This has one of my favorite splash pages in the first issue. And Frank Quitely does such an incredible job of telling the story through his art. Grant Morrison obviously is doing the brunt of the storytelling. The actual storytelling elements that are taking place are all from Grant Morrison's mind. But Frank Quitely adds so much with the facial expressions, the dog, cat, and bunny facial expressions, and the brutality that you see because these animals are weapons. And it is so beautiful, so gruesome, and so emotional at the same time. There are pages in here where there are minimal speech bubbles, and the emotion that jumps off the page from Frank Quitely's art is unmatched, beautiful, incredible. If you're not a Frank Quitely fan, read this. It will make you a fan, I'm telling you. And if you are a Grant Morrison fan or not, read this. I know they're known for kind of being big-brained and pretentious at times, but this is not Grant Morrison-y at all. This reads beautifully. There's heart, there's love, there's emotion in every single page and story element, and that's exactly why it's at number 4. It's above that DC versus Marvel omnibus, which is saying something because I was really pumped for that release, but this story is beautiful. One of the few almost perfect, if not perfect, stories that I have in my collection. And at the number 3 spot, we do have Green Lantern Corps Volume 2 by Peter J. Tomasi and Patrick Gleason. This is an omnibus that I never thought would happen. I didn't think we would get a volume 1, and here we are with a volume 2. This is a title that actually sometimes overtakes my all-time favorite comic book run ever, which is Green Lantern by Jeff Johns, depending on the issue, but it is such a good title. Such a good title. I cannot emphasize that enough. I feel like I was championing Volume 1 when that was being speculated and put out and people were wondering if it was going to happen. I'm going to double down on that and say Volume 2 is just as good. Obviously, you do have the Blackest Night event that takes place during this era of Green Lantern Corps, and a lot of the Blackest Night event issues are collected in here. Not the actual event itself, but the Green Lantern Corps issues. But you get to see how a zombie-like event that's taking place throughout the DC universe, where all of your Green Lantern Corps characters, specifically Kyle Rayner, Guy Gardner, John Stewart, Saronic, just to name a few, all have to revisit past dead loved ones, people that they cared about coming back to life, and in a big yet negative way. And then after that, you get yet another incredible event, which is War of the Green Lanterns, which you follow the main Green Lanterns of Hal Jordan, Guy Gardner, John Stewart, and Kyle Rayner being stripped of their Green Lantern ring and what they do to still try and save the day. You have even more focus on Guy Gardner, which is obviously going to become a lot more of a hot topic with the Superman movie or the teaser trailer being released, where we saw Guy Gardner in that. So I do think there's going to be a lot of focus on that character, and you get a lot of story elements applied to him during this run. Well, the first volume and the second volume, but this run in total. And then you do wrap up this omnibus with the New 52 era of Green Lantern Corps, which I think is where it falls off a little bit, but is still really, really good. And during that era of Green Lantern Corps, or GLC, whatever you want to call it, we have Guy Gardner and John Stewart being focused on instead of Guy Gardner and Kyle Rayner. So for my John Stewart fans, you get a lot of that character during that portion of this omnibus, or that era of Green Lantern Corps. But so good. Can't emphasize that enough. This is really one of those reads that I think ticks a lot of the boxes that people want out of comic books, and I think it builds the Green Lantern lore even more so than what Jeff Johns did during his run on Green Lantern. Peter J. Tomasi and Patrick Gleason apply even more lore and building up background supporting cast member characters and making them very important to the reader. So really good stuff. Highly recommend volume 1 and 2. Read it if you haven't already, because it's really some good stuff. And at the number 2 spot is yet another DC omnibus that I was not expecting to ever come out. And here we are with Aquaman by Peter David, the omnibus. This is the 90s era of Aquaman. This is the harpoon hand, armor wearing, long haired version of Aquaman that most people know and love at this point. It's probably the most remembered version of Aquaman from comics, at least. And this is a Aquaman run you want to read. If you think Jeff Johns made Aquaman badass, Peter David did it first. And you will see that very quickly during this omnibus, where Aquaman stands on his own 2 feet, not only as a hero, but as a title in general. You do have some crossing overs with the Justice League and Superman and the Flash, just to name a few characters. But during this specific run, you're going to see Aquaman kind of have a chip on his shoulder and not want anything to do with the Justice League and those characters, and kind of do his own thing. You're going to have the Time and Tide storyline in here, which is absolutely incredible. You're also going to have the Into the Abyss storyline, or at least that's the name of the first issue that Peter David starts writing, which leads into Aquaman losing his hand and getting that harpoon hand, which eventually kind of gets upgraded throughout the run. And then you're going to have his supporting cast built up from Dolphin to Tempest, specifically those 2 characters, because the Tempest miniseries is collected in here, which is incredible, absolutely amazing. I believe Phil Jimenez does that. And it is really, really some good stuff. I think this will put Aquaman on the map for you. I think if you did not like Jeff Johns' run, you may not enjoy this. There is some required reading I'd recommend, which is the Death of a Prince Aquaman storyline and the Atlantis Chronicles, which are kind of foundational to some characters and plot points that are touched on during this specific run. But overall, this is the Aquaman run you want to start with. This is the Aquaman run, honestly, in general. If you did like Jeff Johns' run, you are going to love this. There is so much action. There's a lot of brutality in here, too. Reading it, I completely forgot the amount of blood and action and gore and just a lot of 90s flair and edge in here, that's for sure. But you get to see just the progression of Aquaman, and that's what I love the most. From him losing his hand to him getting a harpoon, the harpoon being upgraded and having whip-like appendages and hooks, and then eventually him getting the armor because his old armor gets ripped off. Everything is great in here. I absolutely love it. I know it's super 90s and maybe not for everybody, but I promise you, if you give it a chance, you might find something you like in here. And at the #1 spot is, of course, my boy, Superman. Did you expect anything different? This is Superman, the Triangle Years Era Omnibus Volume 1, which means we're hopefully getting more. Speechless. Superman was neglected in the omnibus format game for a very, very, very long time, and they are finally putting some respect on his name, and it's about time because there are so many runs and storylines that are incredible that need to be collected in omnibus format. I hope you're listening, DC. Superman, put some respect on his name. But anyway, this is the run on Superman that I probably recommend the most. I think a lot of people recommend Man of Steel by John Byrne, which took place before this run, but I would probably recommend this more so than anything. This is the era of Superman where he was not only kind of on top of the world over at DC, selling a lot of books, doing very well as a title, but where I feel this is very new reader friendly and just comic book reader friendly in general is because of this being the Triangle Years Omnibus. You do have 4 different Superman titles: Superman, Adventures of Superman, Superman Man of Steel, and Action Comics, all telling essentially the same story. So you don't have any disconnect going from issue to issue. You have the same characters, the same cast, the same plot being explored. There's no issue where you're going to be lost because it continues from issue to issue with the story that's trying to be told by a multitude of incredible writers and artists here. But you have names like Jerry Ordway, Roger Stern, Louise Simonson, just to name a few creators or at least writers that apply their hand and their pen to the character of Superman. This is the lore building era of Superman as well. This is where you're going to see his supporting cast come around and come into play, from Guardian to Starman to Lois Lane, even though she has red hair in here, which she had red hair during majority of this era of Superman. Lex Luthor appears in here back when he was missing his right hand, which we can dive into in another video. But on top of that, you also have one of my favorite storylines where we have the Eradicator pretty much coming into play and coming to blows with Superman, and this fight is absolutely incredible. It goes from Earth to space to pretty much on the surface of the sun, and it is so Superman, so awesome. And if you're a fan of Superman and you love what he is capable of as a character, but also the trials and tribulations that he struggles with as Clark Kent, this is going to be the run for you, because where it explores a lot with Superman and him as a hero, from him struggling with no powers and still trying to be a superhero, to him kind of trying to struggle and grip with his past in the form of Eradicator. You also have the exploration of Clark Kent and his relationships, from Perry White to Lois Lane to Ma and Pa Kent, just to name a few characters that play major roles during this specific era of Superman, and makes it not only super action forward and super Superman-y, if that's a way that I'm going to describe the book, we're going to run with it, but also extremely heartfelt. You get to see the humanity that actually exists in the godlike being that is Superman, and that is the aspect that makes Superman my favorite DC character ever, is because he's more human than anyone in DC, and maybe that's a hot take, but I'm going to die on that hill. Man, he's such an incredible character. Read more Superman. I don't care if you think he's boring or he's a bad character. He's not. I promise you, he has a lot of legendary creators applied to his past and his more dated runs. But then when you get more into the modern era of Superman, you're going to just notice how much all of those runs are paying homage to the history that is behind the character. But this is a great place to start. There's going to be 2 omnibuses that then eventually lead into the Death and Return of Superman omnibus, but the Triangle era is a very, very massive era. I think it'll probably be like 4 omnibuses worth of content, so really anywhere is a good time to start. Every comic is someone's first comic, so just jump in, start reading, and enjoy the ride, and read more Superman, specifically the Triangle era, because it's at #1 for a reason. And that does wrap up my top 5 reads and releases by DC Comics in the year of 2024. This was a huge year for DC. I cannot emphasize that enough. If you're a DC fan, you are eating good, or you were eating good. Fingers crossed 2025 is going to be the same, but we will see. But comment down below, what are your top 3, top 5, top 10 reads and releases from DC Comics of the year of 2024? You guys keep me up to date with books I should be reading, books that should be on my radar. So I'd love to hear from you guys that are watching the video. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you guys always tuning in and being a part of this community. If you are not a part of the community, you can hit that little subscribe button and join. You can also hit the thumbs up icon and ring the bell for notifications while you're down there. Thank you again for watching, and of course, stay nerdy.